Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, you know the deal. It's Jose here, welcoming you to not quite another episode of Amazing Worlds. But before, a word about the non-sponsors of today's video. This way, Guinness Original, because the black stuff for the black hearts out there. Because today, I've seen this kind of video before in other channels. But shout out to Michael K. Vaughan, because I saw his video on like the 20 best novels ever type thing, and I thought, I will do mine. I'll do my take on my favorite best books, 20 best books. If I was, there's a Thailand type thing, what would I take? A few rules though, as usual. I must have read the books. You know me, this is honest reviews. I talk about what I know, what I read. I'm not like some other people I've seen out there, which I'm not going to name names. But also wanted to keep it, like I said, honest. There may be some surprising stuff here. But I'm not going to put books in there just because they are held in super high regard by academic minds. Notwithstanding the literary value and the patina of reverence they've acquired over time, if a book didn't resonate with me, I'm not going to put it in this list. So, already controversial, number one, there's no Dostoevsky here, there is no Tolstoy, none of the Russians, no James Joyce either, and, what is good and bad literature, Pay Vio at Attention has got a great discussion about that. So shout out, check him out again if you haven't done so. But I think unfortunately these books are going to reveal a bit too much of my personality, perhaps. I don't know. So let's get comfortable on the squeaky chair. Let's top up. Let's sip up. And get going in no particular order except for top two. Top two in order. Everything else as I felt about it. So, the first book in my best 20 books ever. Number 20. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, a Brazilian author. The book deals with a little young Andalusian shepherd like yours truly in quest for his dream. All of Coelho's books are very allegorical. They all have a really positive outlook in life and so on. Even Veronica decides to die, which for other reasons is close to my heart as well. But The Alchemist is that kind of young adult next step into serious literature type thing. And I would recommend possibly a younger audience. But if you're not familiar with any of Coelho's books, give it a go. Next, A Prayer for Owen Minnie. I really enjoyed it. One of those great American novels in that tradition about fulfilling your destiny, committing to something and believing in the good of people. John Irving, obviously religious undertones in there, but who am I to criticize? Did you know, apparently, scientifically proven, people that believe live longer. It actually doesn't really quite matter which God you believe in, so long as you believe. Unfortunately, it has to be an honest, true believing thing to gain the benefits from that, but hey ho, there you go. Next, Money by Martin Amis. I really liked the craziness of this novel. The main character, the whole money-driven thing, the crazy, dirty world there, and it reminded me a little bit of the time when I used to work in finance in London. Next is another dark book with a twist at the end. It's rather grotesque. I wouldn't call it horror, but it's certainly unsettling, and that is The Wasp Factory by Ian Banks. It would definitely leave an impression. I'm not entirely sure if, due to its nature, I don't want to spoil anything, publication today wouldn't be free of controversy, but there you go. Next one is the one that's the first one of a number of them that is gonna come out left of field for a lot of you, because me being Spanish, I have to call back to the golden age, the golden century of Spanish arts and literature. And the next book is El Buscón by Francisco de Quevedo. It's a picaresque novel about someone trying to make a living in 17th century Spain, trying to raise above their station, trying to fight the social class, and making his way through cunning and trickery and so on. And it's not the first picaresque novel out there, a genre that was born in Spain, but it's certainly the best example of that kind of thing that I could show you. So there. Plus, Quevedo was a master of the Spanish language. His domain of the concepts and his play on words were absolutely brilliant. Not entirely sure how well these things would translate into English, but I have to put it there. Next, I'm going to go with The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. I read this book for the first time when I ventured into my father's office at home, and I discovered on his shelves these hardbacks bound in navy blue leather with golden stars on them. And it was a collection of great American novels. Faulkner, Twain, Dos Passos, there's a whole lot of them, but the first one I picked was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And I really enjoyed it. It was like I was a kid, and this was like, it was my dad's office, these hardbound books. It felt like a grown adult book, and I could read it and really enjoy it. And I understand that these days there's some criticism out there, but I think it's totally taken out of context. And The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn are possibly as relevant today as they ever were. Next, For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. I know Hemingway criticized for not using more than a word when one was strictly necessary, something like that. Faulkner criticized him, I don't know. Pay again made a comment on my last video when I discussed this. I think something that Faulkner said about Hemingway, that he never used a word where he didn't have to go to the dictionary to find out what it meant, something like that. But don't be fooled. For Whom the Bell Tolls has got a description of the smell of death that goes on for 4 pages that is absolutely haunting, and that stayed with me. And obviously set in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, where obviously not me, but my grandparents lived through, and there is a personal attachment to that book, and it's in my list. Next is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. This is another book that I had a very dog-eared, worn-out, yellowing paperback edition at an apartment that we had on the beach, and with all that salty sea air, and it was almost falling apart. And then I bought it in English a few years back, and what can you say about a book whose title has become part of the everyday use of the language to describe situations? A great insight into the human psyche. Next, The Portrait of Dorian Gray, A Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Great gothic tale, really enjoyed it, but also it's full of little one-liners defining the human mind, and all these little pearls of wisdom that about the human condition that are sprinkled throughout the book, that made it is so quotable. It is truly great, and that's why it's in my list. Next, The Lord of the Rings by Grandpa Tolkien, because why not? It's a great story, great themes about industrialization, war, obviously feeding of Tolkien's own experiences in World War One, and let's not forget, even though it's fantasy, that doesn't mean it's not great writing, because Tolkien was a scholar at Oxford. He translated the Beowulf saga into English. He knew how to write, and it's a fantastic book. And even though it's fantasy, who cares? I think it's one of those books everyone should read, but I'm not telling you to do it. Then we going into dangerous territory here. Next is Pet Sematary by Stephen King. Now, it's horror. It's horror. There's nothing great about it. I notice I'm not an expert in Stephen King. I've read quite a few of his books, but what I found is that his books tend to have this kind of almost timelessness about them. They could have been set in any decade between the 60s and the 90s type thing, and that, I think, it gives them staying power. But Pet Sematary encapsulates what to me a horror story should be, which normally I prefer to digest in short story format, but it works in book format perfectly well. And that ending, oh my god, warning about the dangers of wanting something and running the risk of getting it. It's great. Then is 1984 by George Orwell. I'm not going to reveal these for anyone, but so relevant today, isn't it? There's so many things about 1984 that are present in today's society and today's political discourse that maybe I should give it a reread. But I think particularly, not so much here in Europe, not so much here in Spain, but from what I get over there in the US, you guys have got some issues to work on, and you need to work on your communication skills. There's a danger of thought crime and double speech and all the stuff going on. Next book in my list is Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies made such an impact on me because, yes, people are capable of good things. We know that. I'm not saying people are intrinsically evil, but oh my god, this book about the darkness of the human heart and the cruelty of children is unmatched. I've never seen people be more mean or more nasty to each other than children. And I work at a school and I've got my own kids, and it's food for thought, isn't it? If you honestly believe that everyone is intrinsically good, we need to have a discussion there. Next, it's Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. Really love this book. It's a coming of age story. Who hasn't been there? Struggling to come to terms with the first love and having to let go because it's not meant to be, but yet we want to cling on so much to it because I don't think I've ever loved anyone the same way I ever loved the first woman I truly loved for the first time. And I think it's a very human emotion, and I think the book is really emotive, and for that reason it's on my list. Next four, except for maybe one, it's going to catch a lot of people by surprise. So here we go. Number 4, La Fiesta del Tubo by Mario Vargas Llosa, a Chilean author about the revolution in the Dominican Republic. Is a fantastic book. The writing is incredible. The human story that he weaves, how people will go places you couldn't even imagine to maintain status, to keep hold of power, to cling on to their status. It goes to very dark places, and the narration, it's a flawless book. And if I don't know. There's so much richness in the English language that perhaps books in different languages don't get the kudos they deserve. I don't see very many people. I know that BookTube, YouTube is predominantly English, but there's a lot of things worth exploring out there. Next one is Amor en los tiempos del cólera, so Love in the Times of Cholera, by Colombian author Gabriel García Márquez. Now, I know that when people talk about Gabriel García Márquez, 100 Years of Solitude is always the book that gets referenced and the book that gets talked about as a first exponent of the magic realism and all that kind of stuff. And I've read it, it's fine. But for me, Love in the Time of the Cholera, maybe because I've read it, I think it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, as an adult, I really appreciated the story. And again, that theme of love enduring over time, and you know, about this man who really loved this woman and swore his undying love for her and remained celibate for her throughout his life from the waist up. Alright, a quick self-intermission, because I realized when I was putting the video together during the editing process I had left 2 books out, and that would make it 18, not 20, which is a weird number. So, still in no particular order, the next book in the list would be A Confederacy of Dances by John Kennedy Toole. I would love him to be related to the Kennedys. I suspect he was not. Fantastic book, because how can you tell a genius apart from an idiot? I laughed out loud with the misadventures of Ignatius Reilly and his pyloric valve. It is a delightful book. Great history behind it, how it was published after his death because of his mum, and you can almost feel the self-insertion in the narrative, and it's strongly recommendable if I was the kind of person to recommend books, but it is on my list, so there you go. And the final book in my top 20 best books of all time is Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I know maybe it's a bit of a cliche, but teenage angst, we've all been there, is part of life. So again, another book that strikes a chord with the human mind. I really enjoyed it, and it's one of those books that through that Mel Gibson movie, Conspiracy, it kind of spiked my curiosity and I quite enjoyed it, which is, again, as usual, why it is on my list. So now, intermission over, and now we go to the actual top 2 books in the list. Next book, and it's number 2, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Probably the greatest American novel ever. Perhaps with permission of Moby Dick, I don't know. But it's, again, a great tale of human struggle, obviously center around a very real issue, a particular point in time in the history of the United States, and talk about gut-wrenching endings. That's one for the ages there. And we get to number 1, my all-time favorite, best ever book ever written. It could be none other than The Adventures of Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. Now, Don Quixote has got a pretty strong claim to being the best book ever written, the universal novel. And again, if you are from a non-Spanish or from a predominantly English-speaking nation, you might disagree, or you might think, I don't know what you might think, because if you value the Russians, you must value Don Quixote. Yes, he was written almost at the turn of the Renaissance period, but the themes it touches on, it's a deconstruction of the human mind to so many levels that are still relevant today. It is considered the first ever modern novel. It also has in Sancho Panza the first ever sidekick, the realist that counterpoints the idealism of Don Quixote, that is so delightful. And when I talk about Don Quixote, I'm talking about part 1 and part 2. And that transition from the chivalry books into actual modern novels dealing with daily occurrences. I've read it a couple of times. We had to read it at school, selected chapters. I chose to read it all, and it's a book I haven't got it here, still at my parents', but I think I'm waiting to turn 50, which is unfortunately not that far in the future, and read it again. And probably when I'm 80, if I get there, I'll read it again. It's one of those books that you can get so much out of them. And it just goes to show how human nature has barely changed over time, and we humans are a certain way, and you can polish, you can sand the edges, but at the core, I think we're all pretty much the same. But anyway, these are my 20 best books ever. Perhaps there are some questionable choices there, but as I said, I gave predominance to books that stayed with me, that made an impact on me, and I wasn't gonna go with the classic take with the classic books that everyone would assign high literary value to. Some of them are, and there's a good reason for it. But some of them perhaps got you by surprise, and I would love to hear your comments below. As usual, thank you so much ever for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think. Take loads and loads of care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.